So the final section we're going to take a look at is what happens if we have squares and square roots, and how do we remove those and kind of clean those up from our equation. So we need to remember that to remove a square or square root, the opposite needs to be applied to both sides. Okay, so opposite needs to be applied to both sides. We remove all exterior terms. Okay, so we need to remove all the exterior terms before taking the square root or square of each side. It's just going to be a whole lot easier if we get rid of our terms to make it kind of by itself there. So this first one here, what we're going to do, okay, and I just need to tweak it a little bit here. We're going to do x squared plus 2, and we're actually going to change this one here as well. That's going to be a plus as well. That was a mistake. I mean, I'll have to change that in my master copy. It should be pluses. Okay, so those should be pluses. So what we're going to do here is we want to get this one all by itself here. So what we're going to do is the first thing we're going to do is we're going to remove the adding 2 by, and this should now say subtracting 2. And I'm just going to quickly cross that off there. Okay, so we're no longer adding. Okay, just a little tweak I needed to make. Okay, so we're subtracting 2 to both sides. Okay, so when we're adding like that, we need to get rid of it by subtracting 2 from both sides. So we subtract 2 there, we subtract 2 there. That's supposed to be a subtracting 2. There we go. And so what that's going to look like there is we're going to be left with x squared over here. And on this side, we're going to have 25. Now the next step, and again, this is kind of going through and, sorry, I want to change that color. I want it to be yellow. And now it's not going to change. Okay. Then it's going to be blue. This way it goes. All right. Then we take the square root of both sides when the square is all alone on one side. We do that to make it a whole lot easier. Okay. Otherwise, we would have to take the square root of an expression. Not very easy. Okay. Square root of expression takes a lot of work, takes a lot of effort. We don't need to do that. We can just take the square root of this square right here. And again, we need to do both sides. Now, what we also need to remember here is that when the square root is taken, and this is to solve for our variable, there are 2 answers are possible. Okay, so two answers are possible. There's the positive and the negative values. Okay, so there's positive and negative values which are possible. So in this case here, when we take the square root of it, we're going to get x all by itself. But now x could be the square root of 25, which is 5, or in the same time, it could also be negative 5. We're not sure exactly which one was used because both could have been used to solve, so we have to put both as our answers. Okay, so both the positive and the negative are involved there. Now, when we have a power applied onto a set of parentheses, it actually becomes a little bit trickier. Okay? It becomes a little bit trickier because there's multiple steps that we need to do to solve. And we'll get into that in just a little bit. To start with, though, let's start with, again, solving here, get rid of this 2. So we got to subtract 2 from both sides. Okay, and when we subtract 2 from both sides, we're going to get, and let's make a function here again. We're going to get x minus 1 squared is equal to 9. Okay, so x minus 1 squared is equal to 9. Now, what this means here is that this whole thing is being squared. So that parentheses is being squared. So that's like a single unit being squared. And so because of that, we're going to take the square root of that one, and we're going to take the square root of this here. And so what it now tells us here is that when we do this, we could have two possible answers for us. So this one becomes two possible answers. And so what I mean by that is that we could have x minus 1 is equal to 3, or we could have x minus 1 is equal to negative 3. Okay, so it could be positive 3 or negative 3. And so then in this case here, we need to add 1 to both of these here to try to solve. But what we're going to get, and these are two different cases, okay, we would have, if we add 1 to both sides here, we get x is equal to 4. And if we add 1 to this side, we get that x is equal to negative 2. We actually have two different answers, and I'm going to actually go through and do the work here. So if we add 1 to this side, we get positive 4. If we add 1 to this side, see, so that was a little ugly. Let's get rid of that. Okay, so if we add 1 to that side and add 1 to this side, that becomes negative 2. So there's actually two possible answers for this situation. Yeah, there's two possible answers for this situation. And again, this one it's not overly difficult once we get inside. So there we are able to solve for both answers without too much difficulty. Okay, without too much difficulty. This next one here, okay, we have 4x squared is equal to 16. Okay, again, we want to get x squared all by itself. So what we need to do is we need to divide both sides by 4. We need to get rid of that 4 because 4 is being multiplied to the x squared. It's going to eliminate that x squared. Or sorry, it's not going to eliminate the x squared, it's going to eliminate the 4. And so this is then going to become x squared is equal to 4. Okay, it's going to be x squared is equal to 4. Next step, again, similar to what we did before, we have just a variable squared, square root on that side, square root on that side. And we're going to have two different answers. We're going to have that x is equal to 2, or in this case, because again, we just kind of come up with our final here, negative 2. So it'll be 2 or negative 2. Again, because that was our last step. When we did the square root here, it wasn't our last step. So we still had to do one more step and solve for 3 and negative 3. In this case, we just have these two here, or we just hit this as our last step, so we could solve for that. What about when we have square roots? Okay, so in this case here, we have a square root. Again, we need to get that square root all by itself. So we start by adding 4 to both sides. And what that's going to leave us then is it's going to leave us that square root all by itself. Square root of x is equal to 6. Now at this point, okay, we can get rid of that square root. And so we're going to square this side and we're going to square this side. And what we come up with then, we get our x all by itself. And on the other side, we get 36 because 6 squared is 36. Okay, so 6 squared is 36. Last one here, okay, our last example, we have the square root of x minus 4. So we need to think of the x minus 4 as being in that parentheses, which is having a square root. So we're going to take the square root of this side to get rid of it, and then we're going to take the square root of that side to match up, because again, whatever we do to one side, we need to do to the other side. So once we've done the square root of that, we're just going to be left with x minus 4 on that side there, and on the other side, we get 25. Okay, we get 25. So now add 4 to both sides. There we go. And we're going to be left with x is equal to 29. And so our final answer would then be 29. Again, because it's underneath the square root, it's like it's in parentheses. Okay, and so we have to get rid of the parentheses first, just like we did in number 1 here. We got rid of those parentheses. That's squared. We had to take the square root of the whole thing to come up with our answer, and then we work on the inside. All right, please do questions 11 and 12. Get those done. Make sure you're showing your work. Make sure you're showing which steps you are doing to take off each piece of your equation.